The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
And now, The Trumpet Daily with Stephen Flurry.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. Appreciate all the emails yesterday that came in following our technical difficulties. The problem was actually on our end, so we can't blame it on YouTube. It's actually the internet service here, not just at Edstone, but I think around Henley and Wootton Wawan just down the road. So that cut out, I think, about halfway through the live stream yesterday. The entire show, however, was still recorded. We had the first half live. The second half I kept going, and we finished the recording. And so it's up in its entirety at the website, the trumpet.com website, and also kpcg.fm. So if you didn't get to hear the entire show yesterday, be assured it is available at the website. And just so that you know, too, we had some pretty good listener feedback for those of you that enjoy listening to those. That's, I think, the last 5-6 minutes of yesterday's show. Well, I referred, speaking of yesterday's show, I referred to that Monday trumpet brief by my father, where he talked about the election struggle, the war over this U.S. Election and the spirit behind it. And he made a statement in that trumpet brief that the devil is in a rage because he knows his time is short. He has nothing to lose. Satan's pulling out all the stops. And I won't go through all the scriptures. Revelation 12, of course, speaks of just how short time is. And so that's why we see the world in the chaotic state that it's in today. I thought this clip was interesting. Of course, this is from Prince Charles. He's of course not talking about some of the events and happenings in the world that we do, but he used some interesting language that we actually have used ourselves. Clip 1.
I'm afraid we are literally at the last hour, and there is real urgency for action. There is hope that we can transform the situation, but I'm afraid we are literally at the last hour, and there is real urgency for action.
And so 2 times in that statement, he refers to the last hour. And of course, my father has a book that goes by that very title. And yet, that certainly highlights just how blind. He's talking, of course, about climate change. He says we're in the last hour, and we've got to make changes. The real dangers in his mind. It's the exhaust coming out the back of a vehicle or aerosol cans or whatever else it might be. The earth is warming. And here we are in the last hour, he says. And how, if only he knew how blind this world is. Look at the blindness that's set in. It's as if we're carrying on in this thick cloud of darkness. And we can't see anything. We're told lies and expected to take it as truth. And then when the truth is told, we're told that those are lies. Isaiah 5, totally upside down. George Orwell made a statement many years ago. The further a society drifts from truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. The further away we are from the truth, it just made me think of that verse, Isaiah 59 and verse 15, where it says those who speak the truth are going to make themselves a prey, a target. And you see it in some of these press conferences. You see it in the way that they go after someone that just presents evidence, facts. And then, like I've said this week, they don't even want to hear it. They just want to cover it up. There's a war over evidence and truth. We're seeing it play out every day. And it's not new to our time. I mean, what is unique and different is that Satan has been cast down these past 30-some years. He's been cast down. He's confined to this earth. And like my father said the other day, he's filled with rage. He knows he has but a short time. Revelation 20 says he's about to be bound in chains for 1,000 years. And so with respect to the devil, there's a real sense of urgency there. And we've got to match that as we pour our hearts into our Bible study and our prayers. We've got to bring urgency to our work. There's a real spirit world, and there's a war going on over the truth. I'll just leave it to you. The memory verse, John 8 and verse 44, where Jesus said to these Pharisees, these chief priests of his day, he said that they were of their father, the devil. They were of their father, the devil, and the devil is the father of lies and murder. And if you read that passage, you can start at John 8 and verse 44 and then just continue to read through to verse 52. And on 2 occasions, those people that heard Jesus Christ tell them that you're of your father, the devil, they came back and said that Jesus was demon-possessed. So who was right? The two sides couldn't be further apart. Here they were saying that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, was possessed of demons. You talk about a war over truth, evidence. Well, my father's been saying for many, many years, I talked earlier this week about Satan coming as an angel of light. And for many years, my father's talked about how important it is for us, for God's people, for God's work, to expose the devil and his devices and the way he operates. This is from the Monday trumpet brief, where my father says the election has not been decided, and I'm certain you're about to see some of the biggest frauds exposed perhaps ever. It's far from over. And why did God allow it to happen the way that he did? Well, it has to do with exposing great evil. It says here, this means this nation is about to be shocked. I believe you're going to see frauds exposed like you've never even imagined. In a sense, you could say the left is fighting against God and God's prophecy. Who do you suppose is going to win that battle? As I said on Monday, all the experts, the media mob, they're telling you one thing, but what does God say? What does Bible prophecy have to say? It says, I don't know exactly how this will play out, but I believe God is allowing it to happen this way to ensure that the evil and corruption in America are exposed. So even when it looks bad, and we had our moments, like I said on yesterday's program, we had our moments in the lawsuit over Mystery of the Ages where it looked pretty bad. And God allowed it because he wanted to expose the evil in the worldwide Church of God. He says, finally, God is going to use these events to expose the evil and corruption in America, and he will ensure that every one of his prophecies is fulfilled. See, God's work continues on. God's purpose and plan continues. It goes forward. And along the way, of course, he exposes the devil. So you can see why Satan's filled with wrath. He knows his time is short. And that's why we're seeing the severity of the problems plaguing our world, our nations today. And that's why it just gets worse, like 2 Timothy 3 says. My father, as I say, he's made this point about exposing the devil and his evil tactics before, many times before, from the Saving America, from the radical left temporarily. This is May of 2018. He said before the election, just about everyone believed Hillary Clinton would be the next president. If she had won, none of this corruption would have come to light. So had that election in 2016 gone a different way, this lawlessness that's been exposed since that time, it would not have come to light. And then he says this, and I've given you this quote quite often before. Donald Trump has proved himself willing to take a stand where others have not. It is quite something to behold him resisting these anti-American forces. He has inspired a few other leaders to challenge the radical left and help expose it for what it is. And this is what the devil hates. Most of all, he fears exposure. In the Habakkuk booklet, that's a booklet my father wrote years ago, and he had a lot to say in that booklet about the court case, the mystery of the ages battle. He said at one point, speaking of the devil, he's in a fitful rage, and he's trying to destroy mystery of the ages. Never has the work suffered such wrath. I mean, the church, God's work, it came under fire during that 6-year battle because of the fitful rage that the devil was in. And it had its ups and downs, the lawsuit, the litigation. But in the end, you look at the bottom line, you look at how it played out, and then in the end, all of that material, all of that literature, God just handed it to us. And so like in America Under Attack, the point that my father makes there is there's some real strong parallels between that history and what we're seeing happen or play out in our nations today. The devil in such a fitful rage, and he just goes after anyone that would bring truth to the podium. He just attacks. If it's someone that's exposing evil and lawlessness, you can be sure they're going to be a pretty big target. You go back a few years when Devin Nunes and his office and what they were exposing about the deep state and the unconstitutional attack, the spying, the lying in FISA courts. You remember the Devin Nunes memo from a couple years ago? They're still going after him because he exposed a great evil, going back to the Habakkuk booklet. It says, God revealed new prophecy to us after we stepped out in faith and fought for mystery of the ages. But now we have lost the second round, and God has revealed very specifically why. Satan and those he inspires must be exposed. You see, sometimes God will allow a setback, a loss, just so that he can reel in these enemies a little bit further, a little bit closer, and then expose them all the more. I heard someone yesterday, a commentator, talk about how that it's through the discovery process that the lies can be exposed. And we certainly learned that in our lawsuit, our litigation. The discovery, once you're into court, once you're in the midst of a battle in court, you have to turn over discovery. You have to hand over evidence. And then the prosecutors, the attorneys can begin to piece things together and show the judge, here's what they did. Here's what they were up to. We had a pretty good idea of all of the nefarious activity going on in the late 1980s, but boy, when we got into that litigation and they turned over discovery and we had all these internal memos and documents and letters and emails and such, then you were able to see all of the detail, all of the evil and the lawlessness in great detail. Satan hates being exposed. This is from an article my father wrote back in 2011. It says, God wants to reveal Satan to this world. He wants us to reveal Satan to the Laodiceans, and Satan hates that more than anything. But this is our job. We're here to reveal Satan the devil. You see, the Bible talks about his devices, his evil devices, 2 Corinthians 2 in verse 11. And we've got to reveal that to the world. We have a part to play in this, exposing the devil. Now, I say, you see parallels with what we experienced in the church and what we're seeing in the nations of Israel today, specifically the United States. And what's the main reason why there's so much hatred and contempt for Donald Trump? Well, I gave you this quote the other day from the Federalist. where this author says Donald Trump's entire presidency is an affront to the media. His victory was an assertion that they, the media, are not in charge. We, the people, are. That's why they hate him. That's why they have to destroy him. And that's what this power grab is about. You see, it's a war. There's already a civil war going on. They want to destroy him. And among other things, he wants to expose them. He said, and we've played the clips for you before, where he'll consider this, exposing this evil. He'll consider that one of his great accomplishments, one of the great accomplishments of his presidency, to expose this evil going on in Washington, D.C., in our own nation. So here's this spiritual war going on. And, really, as much as the press got it wrong on just about everything this past year, the one thing that they certainly got right was, as I've said earlier, I think it was earlier this week or maybe last week, they revealed their strategy going into this election. They had all of these lawsuits, hundreds of them, trying to get states to allow for mail-in balloting to go in, or on rather, days after Election Day. That was going on in the lead up to the election. And then a month or two before, they talked about, the red wave and, okay, Donald Trump might look like he's the winner on election night, but just be patient. We'll try to find some of those extra ballots. Well, they didn't put it that way, but they said we've got to keep counting for days on end and then fight this in court and litigate this. Now, that's maybe the only thing that's kind of changed, because once they finally got the votes that they needed, then there was this rush to declare Joe Biden the president-elect of the United States of America. And then they just immediately wanted to intimidate everyone into submission. You just go along because we, the media, we've decided. You remember the New York Times on Election Day. We're the ones who decide, not the American people. We do. So they decided on Saturday. And then ever since then, they've been attacking people who would come forward with evidence, screaming that you don't have the evidence. You don't have it. And then meanwhile, you have Joe Biden out there saying that, look, I'm here to heal the nations. I'm here, or heal the nation, I should say, to bring everyone together after they've been working for 4 or 5 years to destroy their opponents, to destroy the Trump presidency. Here's Joe Biden earlier this week, clip 2.
This election is over. It's time to put aside the partisanship and the rhetoric that designed to demonize one another.
So he says it's over and done with. Put aside the partisanship and everyone come together. He was asked yesterday by someone who, this was a reporter who asked, what about these anxious Americans and the Trump administration's refusal to concede? Here's clip 3.
Sir, what do you say to the Americans that are anxious over the fact that President Trump has yet to concede and what that might mean for the country?
Well, I just think it's an embarrassment, quite frankly.
He's embarrassed. He's embarrassed that Donald Trump won't concede. You've got to do it. That's what we've been told since Saturday. If you don't concede, well, you're disrupting the entire democratic process. You're endangering the future of American elections. How soon we forget. This was the first debate. I think you go back a month or two before the election and listen to what Joe Biden had to say in response to Chris Wallace's question, clip 4.
Will you urge your supporters to stay calm while the vote is counted, and will you pledge not to declare victory until the election is independently certified?
Yes, and here's the deal.
Will you hold off on declaring victory until it's certified? And he said yes. Back then, he said yes, I'll hold off. There are no premature statements with me. But then, 5 days after the election, after the counting stopped, and then the bundle showed up at 4:30 a.m., and then the counting resumed, and then the media decided, nothing validated, nothing certified, the media decided, and he gave a victory speech. He gave a victory speech on Saturday night after saying, I will not do this. And he did it. He certainly did. I gave you this quote from Breitbart, I believe yesterday. He's talking about the media here, saying that the media are actively trying to block a fair and impartial look at what happened on election night, actively looking to suppress and dismiss evidence. See, it's much worse than just saying to their opponents, you don't have the evidence. They're shouting them down or they're cutting them off because they want to cover up the evidence. They don't want the American people to see what happened. It says, even before it's presented, to dismiss the evidence, even before it's presented, aggressively trying to shut down investigations, aggressively trying to stop even run-of-the-mill recounts and recanvasses. I mean, it's not like that's never happened before. They gave Al Gore 37 days in 2000, and the media, they were zooming in on the hanging chads. They loved it. They loved it. They wanted it to go on longer. We've got to count and recount and count again. Not so this time. John Nolte says here, the media are un-American, evil, and terrified of what might be uncovered. See, that's the thing. They're scared of what might be revealed. And so their argument is that it's irresponsible for President Trump to look into this. And when someone talks about 238 pages of sworn affidavits, they change the subject. The evidence is mounting. It's overwhelming. It will be. It's a massive amount of evidence. And yet, as I was telling Sam today, we'll have to look into some of these court filings ourselves because you can be sure the media will not cover it. They will not get into it. They will not report on it. They've already decided the outcome. They've already made the declaration. In their minds, it's certified. It's been validated. The New York Times today, front page story. This was the lead story on the daily New York Times email. So I presume it's right at the top of the print edition. The Times called officials in every state, no evidence of voter fraud. Can you believe this? The New York Times made some phone calls. They've called some officials in 45 states, evidently. And they've discovered that there's no voter fraud. Case closed. It's over and done with. This is all that you need to know. I mean, it's a 1,900-word article. They've written 10,000-word articles about some tiny, tiny, tiny little lie about the Russian collusion stories. 1,900 words, case closed. Now, they did have 3 journalists on the story. Sometimes, if it's really important, they'll put 5 people on it. But they had to make a lot of phone calls, so there's 3 people assigned to this story. This is their exhaustive investigation. He's declared on Saturday, here's the story on Wednesday morning, no evidence of voter fraud. And that's what you hear in the echo chamber. No evidence, no evidence, no evidence. This is what people are hearing. A lot of people that just get their news from the New York Times or CNN, they're convinced. They're not going to go read a court brief. There was an 85-pager filed just yesterday. They're not going to go and read that. They're not going to read those affidavits that Kayleigh McEnany's holding up. They could care less about that. They're just going to hear from the New York Times. There's no evidence. Look, this is from the article. It says many of the claims, it's quoting actually this spokeswoman for Josh Shapiro. He's the Pennsylvania AG, by the way, who said, ahead of the election that Donald Trump was going to lose Pennsylvania. Before they even had the count on Election Day. Before Election Day, he tweeted out that Donald Trump will lose, and he wasn't saying it as a commentator. He's the Attorney General, okay? He's the Attorney General. And so here's his spokeswoman. She said in the New York Times article, they wanted to make sure this quote got in there, many of the claims against the Commonwealth have already been dismissed, and repeating these false attacks is reckless. She says this, even as these lawsuits are just now off and running, and all of these affidavits, all of these whistleblowers, she's the spokeswoman for Shapiro, Josh Shapiro, who just utterly despises President Trump. The Times says this, election officials in dozens of states representing both political parties said that there was no evidence that fraud or other irregularities played a role in the outcome of the presidential race, accounting to a forceful rebuke of President Trump's portrait of a fraudulent election. This is a forceful rebuke, this 1,900-word article based on a few phone calls, and most of them to Democrats and never Trumpers. Okay, never Trumper Republicans. 1,900 words. The Times says here over the last several days, the president, members of his administration, congressional Republicans, and right-wing allies have put forth the false claim that the election was stolen from Mr. Trump and have refused to accept results that showed Joseph R. Biden Jr. as the winner. Now, they say this before there's any recounting, before there's any investigations, before we actually find the evidence in the canvassing like I played for you yesterday. They have decided, just like they decided on Saturday that Biden was the winner. Now they've decided there's no voter fraud, nothing. And did they decide this after an investigation? No, they just called people. They called people who said, yeah, there's nothing to it. Don't worry about it. Here's the article. Kansas, yes, Kansas. Kansas did not experience any widespread systematic issues with voter fraud. Well, now we can go to bed and sleep easy. We know that Kansas is A-OK. They've actually called officials in Kansas. Nothing about Wayne County or Milwaukee County or Allegheny County or Philadelphia County or Fulton County. These are the seats of the Democrat machines controlled by Democrats. This is where the fraud was carried out. And here's the New York Times with its 3 reporters calling Kansas, of all places. Why not look into Wayne County? Why not consider these hundreds of affidavits? Why not look into these lawsuits that have been filed? This is the Kansas official. We are very pleased with how the election has gone up to this point. The Kansas official says. A couple more quotes here. It says, some states describe small problems common to all elections, which they said they were addressing. So here's the other tack that they're taking, that either it's no fraud, that actually was earlier in the week. Nothing. No voter fraud. And now the evidence starts pouring in, and then you hear them say, well, there is a little bit of fraud, but that's kind of normal. That happens every year. That happens at every election cycle. But it's certainly not enough to give the president 13,000 more votes in Georgia. Well, okay then let him recount things. Let him find out for sure. And let observers from both sides come in to inspect the ballots. And then we'll know. Simple enough. This is the concluding quote. What emerged in the Times' reporting was how, beyond the president, Republicans in many states were engaged in a widespread effort to delegitimize the nation's voting system. So on the one hand, you have all of these lawsuits being filed, claiming that there's widespread voter fraud, and then the New York Times rushing to the defense of the president-elect that they have chosen, saying that there's not a widespread voter fraud effort, but a widespread effort to delegitimize the voting system. The war over evidence. And it gets worse, actually. This is from Bloomberg yesterday as well. For perhaps the first time in American history, a coordinated effort to taint or overturn a presidential election may be underway. You see, Satan is the accuser of the brethren. Satan accuses those that he targets of the very same things he's guilty of. That's what we're seeing here. Imagine Bloomberg, after all of these attacks following 2016, they want for President Trump to go ahead and concede. Has Hillary Clinton even conceded yet? Because she has called the president illegitimate, and so have a number of Democrats. Leave aside Stacey Abrams from 2 years ago. Has she conceded yet? Maybe President Trump should say, I'll concede. Not that he should, but maybe he should say, I'll concede when Hillary does. How about that? These people routinely reject the results of elections. And then further than that, they have done everything possible to undermine, to destroy, in fact, their opponents. And here comes Bloomberg saying that because President Trump wants to have a recount or file a lawsuit because of foul play, he's trying to taint or overturn the presidential election. That's what the media are trying to do. That's why they came out with their premature declaration. They're trying to overturn the will of the people, clearly. And we'll see that as the evidence comes forth. Here's Kayleigh McEnany last night on Fox News talking about just that, the evidence. Clip 9.
We keep hearing the drumbeat of where is the evidence? Right here, Sean. 234 pages of sworn affidavits. These are real people, real allegations, signed with notaries who are alleging the following, among other contentions. They are alleging, this is one county, Wayne County, Michigan. They are saying that there was a batch of ballots where 60% had the same signature. They are saying that 35 ballots had no voter record, but they were counted anyway, that 50 ballots were run multiple times through a tabulation machine, that one woman said her son was deceased, but nevertheless somehow voted. These are one of many, many allegations in one county, in a county no less, where our poll watchers were in many cases threatened with racial harassment. They were pushed out of the way, and Democrat challengers were handing out documents how to distract GOP challengers. These are real, and anyone who cares about transparency and the integrity of the system should want this to pursue to the discovery phase.
So there's that. And then there's the phone call the New York Times made to Kansas. The Kansas official says, I think it's gone pretty smooth here. There's all this. That's just from Wayne County, the area around Detroit. This is at the heart of one of the lawsuits that has been filed. All of the evidence, some of these allegations, the Michigan suit, that ballots were counted even though the voter's name did not appear on the official voter roll. That election workers were ordered to not verify voters' signatures on absentee ballots. They were ordered to backdate absentee ballots and to process such ballots regardless of their validity. So even if they're illegal, even if they're bogus, even if it's not a real person, just go ahead and process it. Election workers processed ballots that appeared after the election deadline and falsely reported that those ballots had been received prior to November 3rd. Now, these are serious charges of corruption. And, of course, you can never know what a judge might do because there's plenty of left-wing judges. We learned that in fighting for raising the ruins. But there was also the occasional breath of fresh air. Judge Letts, Judge Benedetti. This Michigan suit, defendants used false information to process ballots. Also, defendants coached voters to vote Joe Biden, following them into the voting booth. Here's what you need to do. And you could see how you could really manipulate the system, particularly if you're trying to harvest ballots through elderly care centers, as Lindsey Graham noted yesterday on that clip we played. This is from this is our favorite affidavit from this Michigan suit. Listen to what this witness describes. And keep in mind, these are witnesses that are swearing that this is the truth under oath, under the penalty of perjury, if they're found out to be lying. I mean, that's a felony. You could go to jail for a long time. At approximately 4:30 a.m., this is one witness, according to one witness, I thought everyone was going to go home as our shift had ended. There were two men. This is a guy working in Wayne County, Michigan. There were two men in charge of the counting, one in his 30s and one in his 50s. At approximately 4:30 on November 4th, so this is the morning right after the election night, early in the morning, counting had stopped. America went to bed, and this was happening in Wayne County. It says the man in his 50s got on the microphone and stated that another shipment of absentee ballots would be arriving and would have to be counted. I heard other challengers say that several vehicles with out-of-state license plates pulled up to the TCF Center a little before 4:30 a.m. and unloaded boxes of ballots. It says at approximately 4:30, tens of thousands of ballots were brought in and placed on 8 long tables. Unlike the other tables, these boxes were brought in from the rear of the room. The same procedure was performed on the ballots that arrived at 4:30, but I specifically noticed that every ballot I observed was cast for Joe Biden. Imagine that. The boxes come in at 4:30, and they're all for Joe Biden. It says, while counting these ballots, I heard counters say at least 5 or 6 times that all 5 or 6 ballots were for Joe Biden. All ballots sampled that I heard and observed were for Joe Biden. Overwhelmingly. Boxfuls of votes coming in the dead of night for Joe Biden. And the New York Times is trying to figure out what happened in Kansas. To say there's no evidence at all of any kind of wrongdoing or foul play or voter fraud is pure and simple will worship. The article I referenced yesterday, A Dangerous New Age of Worshiping the Will. And my father made the point there, without a free and truthful media, we can't survive this. That's how dangerous this is. There is, as he said, there is no limit to what they will do to attack this administration, to undermine the election. My father was writing about how they were undermining the election of 2016 and that they'll do it with the next one. He wrote that back in May. And look at where we are. Look at where we are today. President Trump, he fired Mark Esper, the defense chief, not yesterday, I think it was the day before. I think I mentioned it on yesterday's program. And listen to this is the former CIA director, John Brennan. You know, he's got a big job at one of the cable news networks. Commentator, and should Biden win and go forward, I suppose he'd probably be brought out of retirement and get a nice cushy job in the Biden administration. But here is Brennan yesterday on national TV talking about what's behind the firing of Mark Esper, clip 19.
Why did he summarily dismiss Secretary Esper? Is it just to settle a score, or does he plan to do something on the military front that Secretary Esper would have opposed?
Could it be a military operation? I don't know who the interviewer was there, but where's the interviewer coming in and saying, wait a second, hold on now, we're going to have to cut you off. Where's the evidence? You're saying that the reason for the firing might be because President Trump's planning a secret military operation? That's just discussed openly. And it's not just John Brennan. It's not just, the ones that were there during the Antiochus administration. It's the news media, too. This is Martha Raddatz making the same point, clip 20.
No one has seen anything like this. There is concern about what this means. Is the president planning a military operation or the use of federal troops, which Esper opposed?
Here the president hasn't gotten involved in one war, one military operation, aside from, I guess, a few bombing campaigns with ISIS. Outside of that, he's in full-scale retreat everywhere else in the world. And there's John Brennan. Keep in mind, the new normal, when anyone from the Trump administration says something the media disagrees with, the new normal is to cut them off, to shut them down. You don't have the evidence, so we're going to break in like Shep Smith did. You don't have the evidence, so we're going to break in like Neil Cavuto did. And here are these people talking about a secretive military operation. They have no evidence, and yet they can just wax eloquent. Apparently, they can just say whatever, and they do, and they get away with it. Happens all the time. Double standard through and through. You may have seen the clip earlier this week of Ben Rhodes. He was one of Barack Obama's top aides, and he was out there on TV talking about Joe Biden. They see him as the next president. He's the president-elect. And in fact, nothing has been verified. Nothing has been validated. Nothing has been certified. But he's already on the horn. He's talking with world leaders all over the place. Here's Ben Rhodes from a couple days ago, clip 5.
The center of political gravity in this country and the world is shifting to Joe Biden. Foreign leaders are already having phone calls with Joe Biden talking about the agenda they're going to pursue January 20th.
So he's calling people from around the world. And, of course, there have been a number of conservative sites that have said, well, hang on a second. This is why a 3-star general who was brought in as the national security advisor for the incoming Trump administration, Mike Flynn, he makes a phone call to a Russian ambassador, and they put him in jail, the Obama holdovers. He still is fighting for his livelihood, for his life, his normal life. He's still trying to get out of court because they went after him, suggesting that he violated the Logan Act. That's what they relied upon. That obscure act that's never used, that basically says, if you're not in the presidential administration, you've got to be careful who you talk to or what you say to leaders abroad. So they were investigating Flynn back at the end of 2016. They couldn't get anything. And it was Joe Biden. You can't make this up. It was Joe Biden who said, well, hey, maybe we can get Flynn on the Logan Act. Because isn't he calling these Russian ambassadors? The Trump administration isn't even in power yet. So they kept that investigation open. And then, of course, they got Flynn on a technicality, and he's still fighting in court over it. Here's Joe Biden yesterday talking about all the world leaders that he's had discussions with. Clip 6.
Number one, I've had the opportunity to speak with now 6 world leaders, and the response has been very fulsome, energetic, and they're all looking forward to being able to, from Great Britain to France to Germany to Canada, et cetera, and Ireland.
I mean, the phone calls are just coming in from all over the world. It was interesting. Yesterday, the Senate had a hearing with Andy McCabe. He's the one he was right in there going after Mike Flynn, lying repeatedly over and again. He was involved in those bogus FISA applications. And quite a revealing exchange with Senator Ted Cruz. It went on for quite a few minutes, but I'll just give you the gist of it here in clip 7.
And Mr. McCabe, yesterday on MSNBC, Ben Rhodes, the former deputy national security advisor to President Obama, said that foreign leaders are already having conversations with Joe Biden, quote, talking about the agenda they're going to pursue January 20th. Mr. McCabe, based on that testimony, do you believe Joe Biden is violating the Logan Act?
I'm not aware of Ben Rhodes' statements or
take it on faith he said what I read. Assuming that quote is accurate, and it's a verbatim quote, is that a violation of the Logan Act under any plausible theory?
I am not prepared to take your statement on faith.
So McCabe wouldn't respond to his questioning, and Ted Cruz answered for him later saying, Well, of course, Joe Biden's not violating the Logan Act. I don't believe that he is. But the point of it is, you use that to go after an enemy, a political enemy, who's still fighting in court because a judge wants to persecute him, wants to send him to jail, even when the DOJ drops the suit. Because they know there's nothing there. Because they know it was corrupt. He wouldn't answer, though. Because if he would have answered there, I don't believe this is a violation of the Logan Act, then Cruz would have said, well, why did you use the Logan Act? Why did Joe Biden use the Logan Act? To go after and to persecute Mike Flynn. This is the kind of evil and lawlessness that God has been exposing for years. Now, to this point, as I keep saying, hardly anyone has been punished for including the man you just saw right there, Andy McCabe. No one gets punished. John Brennan, I played the clip from him. He's still around. He's consulting the Biden campaign. He said so yesterday, clip 8.
I give my advice, my counsel to anybody who asks, and I have been in touch with the Biden transition people. Terrific group of people with lots of experience, and I think they are ready and eager and able to assume the responsibilities once the Biden administration is in place.
So many of the same actors, you see, they'll come right back out of the woodwork if Biden were to get in there. He was the vice president, after all, under Obama. Here's Brennan. He headed up the CIA. He's already giving advice. And so, again, everybody has their strong opinions about how it's going to play out. We look to Bible prophecy. We look at the fact that Satan is on a shortened time frame here. He's in a fit full of rage, as we've read. And he's pulling out all the stops. He is a master at deception. He's a liar. He's the father of lies. He's a murderer. There's no truth in him. Jesus came along and exposed him. He exposed those chief priests and those Sadducees, those Pharisees. He told them, look, you're going the way of the devil here. And those deceived human beings, they turned and said to Christ, you're of the devil. You're demon-possessed. There's no truth in you. It's all-out war over the truth, over evidence. And soon it's going to lead to all-out war in the literal sense out on the streets. And we've already gotten previews of that, even this year. When we come back, I'm not exactly sure what we'll conclude with because we only have a few minutes left, but we'll take a short break. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. If you'd like to email the program, you can send comments to td@kpcg.fm. We'll be right back.
From the Philadelphia Church of God campus in Edstone, England, this is the Trumpet Daily Program with Stephen Flurry.
I'm speaking to you from our television studios in Pasadena, where I speak to the world as a voice crying out in the wilderness of modern religious confusion.
Herbert W. Armstrong was the world's leading televangelist and one of the most prominent religious leaders of the 20th century, watched, read, and followed by millions worldwide. But his legacy of Bible-based humanitarianism came under attack after he died. The cabal of leaders who took control of the church he founded, after pledging to follow in his footsteps, methodically destroyed all he had built. Those who would stop them were silenced or excommunicated. This shocking story of betrayal and deception is told in Raising the Ruins. To learn more, please visit thetrumpet.com. From the Philadelphia Church of God campus in Edstone, England, this is the Trumpet Daily Program with Stephen Flurry.
I've been wanting to get to this article all week. It's actually from the BBC, going back to 2016. This was even before the last election in the United States, September 2nd, 2016. And the title here is Vote Rigging, How to Spot the Telltale Signs. The BBC investigates. And the examples, of course, that they bring forward, they're from some countries in sub-Saharan Africa where voting fraud, it happens quite often. And so the BBC says, this is what you can look for if you think there's vote rigging going on. Here are some of the signs. The first one they give, too many voters. There's an incredibly high voter turnout. Now, you look at first of all, just leave aside this past election last week and the fact that it happened in the United States. If some of the things that we've noted on this program over the last 5 days or so, if some of these things were going on in some faraway nation, and we say, wow, there's reports of this, there's allegations of this, and there's these witnesses coming forward saying this has happened, what would you just naturally think? You'd think, well, boy, there's some kind of serious foul play going on here. The vote turnout as we've covered, for so many of the major cities in the U.S., about normal, except when you get into those 5 counties. I mean, they're just an incredibly high turnout. And that's the second point that this article brings out. Look for too many voters, point one. Secondly, a high turnout in specific areas. This is just the BBC. I'm giving you what the BBC has advised us on. Here's what you can look for. The third point, large numbers of invalid votes. It says there are other more subtle ways that riggers can increase votes or reduce them. Keep an eye on the number of votes excluded as invalid. Even in countries with low literacy rates, this isn't normally above 5%. So those they set aside, well, that's not valid. And then other ones, yeah, here's a bundle. Here's a bundle. It says here, number 4, more votes than ballot papers issued. Now we still aren't getting into all of the evidence. And more of this will turn up, I'm sure, as these lawsuits are in motion. But that kind of fits in with some of the previous points. The fifth point that it brings out here, results that don't match. And Sam and I have gone through, story after story over the past week of these statistics that just don't measure up. Just even stepping back and looking at it statistically. And again, I know that the Trump administration, they're going to have to come up with hard evidence. I understand this. But even those that just look at the numbers, that are just looking at the stats coming in from Wayne County or some of these other counties, they just don't match. And then what do you suppose? Think for a moment. What do you suppose the sixth and final point is that the BBC makes in this article from 2016? Vote rigging, how to spot the telltale signs. The sixth and final point that it gives here, a delay in announcing results. A delay in announcing results. Can you believe this? This has happened. This happened last week in the United States of America. Sam tells me they just announced the results in Alaska. Finally, Fox News announces what? Arizona, right away, election night. Alaska, though, that takes a full 7-8 days. This is the BBC. Finally, something that is not necessarily a sign of rigging, but is often assumed to be so. Election commissions, particularly in Africa, can appear to take an inordinately long time to publish official results. It says this is not helped by local observer networks and political parties who, tallying up the results sent in by their agents or mobile phones, have a good idea of the result long before the more cumbersome official process is completed. Well, just a few tidbits, just a few identifying signs of how you might know that there is vote rigging going on. Don't take it from me. Take it from the BBC. Before all of it, long before what happened last week, you read through that article, and it's quite telling. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. If you'd like to email the program, you can send comments to td@kpcg.fm. We thank you for joining us on today's show, and we'll see you tomorrow.